and welcome to 6G World. I'm talking today with Oliver Korfmacher, the VP for Technology at Enea Telecom. Now, Oliver, I understand Enea has been working with telcos on their digital transformation, in part to compete with the digital natives, whether that's the hyperscalers or potentially the likes of Jio, Rakuten or Dish. There's a few things I'd like to pick your brains about. For a start, as we move to an increasingly multi-vendor environment, operators are going to need to take more ownership of their networks, presumably, which is in contrast to what we've seen a few years back when managed services for building and operating networks were quite a big feature for the larger vendors. So it'd be really good to understand what you're seeing there and get into the practical details of how the telcos are going to be able to make this change effectively.
Right. Thanks, Alex. So yes, I think this is actually a key point. And as a start, we might be a bit biased because indeed the multi-vendor scenario is actually where Enea is visible or has visibility into customers, because old-fashioned traditional legacy telco that sticks to monolithic approaches in terms of vendor selection, but also in terms of their architecture. We don't have insight into that for obvious reasons, because Enea focuses on certain areas of the telco world, which is, for example, subscriber data management, a bit of traffic management, security. But for example, we're not active in 5G UPF topics. We're not doing that simply. And we obviously always end in a multi-vendor situation, and only where this is an option for the operator, we have visibility. And from our observations, and this is starting, as said, with the selected telcos that we work with, the art to begin seems to be something like find the right balance between ownership, so and own capabilities, own know-how, own skills, and how much to invest into that, so how much build up a team, build up competences, to put that into a balance into automation and give it to some system integrators, which in a way is not correct for multi-vendor scenarios. Completely giving a multi-vendor architecture to a system integrator then makes it look like a monolith again is not what we see on the market, at least for the telcos that we work with. So for example, German and Norwegian telcos, they are actively looking to build the knowledge to run a multi-vendor scenario by themselves with their own knowledge. Okay,
and presumably that's going to require quite a mindset change then. Particularly if they're coming from this monolithic background in terms of how they manage their processes and to a certain degree also the technology behind it.
Absolutely. And honestly, there were operators exactly a few years ago that sort of removed all their competence, to be direct, and totally rely on external entities, and they are moving back. It's definitely like a wave. It's coming back now. Everybody is sort of insourcing competence or having very trusted advisors that guide them through these principles, because there is, of course, one level of knowledge that is on the functional aspect. So, for example, 5G, all the required network functions that you have to run and build a network in a secure and resilient manner. But the non-functional aspects, all this about automation, how do I do CI/CD? And the newest buzzword seems to be continuous testing, CT, where we have even the testing integrated into the CI/CD pipeline. All that requires a significant yet handleable amount on staffing at the operator. But the good news is this is common knowledge, so you can find these kinds of people on the street, because it's no longer very telco specific. By sharing most of the Kubernetes or most of the automation, all these aspects with the normal IT industry, it's much easier to find knowledge, and they also bring interesting new thoughts. So from an IT background, from a cloud background, they bring interesting new ideas on doing things easier, maybe, and sometimes even cheaper.
Oh, that's cool. And speaking about some of this sort of IT element, I've heard people talk about vendor lock-in, presumably whether that's if we're looking at a sort of monolithic vendor, or if we're going to the sort of monolithic systems integrator, that could be a threat to who owns that subscriber information. I mean, given that data is one of the crown jewels for any telco or tech company, I'd love to dive into that and find out a bit more about how that threat comes about and maybe what to do about it.
We very direct. The reality is that we see specifically in this area ownership of subscriber data, but also subscriber data model, because that's a key enabler for a multi-vendor scenario, that the data model itself is not owned by a specific vendor, but by the telco, at least by standard. So it should be at least compliant to what's 3GPP and other standardization bodies specify. But even better, it should be flexible enough to model what the operator believes are his key values. So it must be something that is not owned by Swedish, Finnish, big companies, but ideally by the operator themselves, because that gives a way of finding in a competitive area to find a smaller vendor that can deliver a funny solution based on a data model that is open to it. That is a key thing. But second, and sorry for being very direct here, we believe that the successful telcos will not give their data to a cloud provider, to a hyperscaler, because they cannot afford a large European operator simply cannot afford to give away the ownership, not just for legal reasons. Of course, they practically are not allowed to give this data away, but also that's what they have. And if they would give it away to AWS, Azure, Google, you name it, they will lose their trust from their customers and become exchangeable. So they're no longer a trust person or a trust entity in this picture. So we believe it's key to keep it. Fine to operate it in a cloud, be it private, be it public, whatever, but it needs to be an open data model, and it needs to be, the content needs to stay with the operator. That seems to be pretty clear. Okay, so I mean, that's very striking then, because you're talking about the idea of almost to compete with the hyperscalers, the operators have to become a hyperscaler, at least on some level. And that sounds kind of zen, but I guess then, you know, when we're talking about this, you know, the data models, the tools to actually sort of manage the transformations, that's one thing. But then, you know, we've seen quite a lot of occasions in the past where, you know, telcos have tried to sort of change themselves around, and they've got loads of technology, and then, but they haven't really addressed the underlying sort of organizational structure or culture. Or we've seen maybe commercial teams not understanding the opportunities that new technology could bring them. And, you know, I mean, you're in the trenches with a number of clients here, so it'd be great to understand if there are any sort of particular sort of stories of best practice that people can learn from, or maybe as well sort of any sort of scare stories that people should be avoiding. I'm sorry to I can tell you both, to be honest. So the on the good end, or on the upside, definitely is that a data layer vendor, be it Enea or one of our competitors, they should have the expertise not just to provide a dump data layer, because specifically the integration into legacy systems, which you obviously, being an operator, cannot avoid completely. You have to integrate into some CRM systems. We're not in a position to say, I am an IT operator, I'm a greenfield, I can completely forget about my CRM, my shops, my customer integration points, and start something from scratch with only web and auto sign up. That's not even from a legal point of view possible. You need to identify, or your customers need to identify themselves. So this logistic, is that right word? So logistical infrastructure is something that you need to have. Yeah. So this anyway needs to stay with the operator and shouldn't be avoided. So this should not be underestimated. So, because the problem is, these guys, they are not cloud native. They are not based on Kubernetes. They might run systems that some of the modern vendors never had heard about, or only from their fathers. And that's a real problem, because the integration is a must. You need to have provisioning infrastructures in place, but also scalable or structures that allow you to scale in both directions with the right amount of automation while keeping the legacy integrated. Yeah, this is the challenge that we see most of the times. Exactly as I said, the technology is one thing, but having the mindset, I think, is that's where it starts from. If you have a team with the right mindset, they manage to convince other teams that the way they are going forward in that techco approach. So we're sort of moving from a telco thinking to a techco thinking. You still need to keep the telco genes, but the techco thinking, it's as simple as, yes, I have an Ansible script. I have technology that can you can look it up in Wikipedia. So it's no more a secret. That seems to be the key finding that we had.
Okay, and I mean, as you say, there's this really interesting culture there where, you know, these companies that do have a large amount of legacy are trying to move towards a more cloud native structure. It feels as though there's sort of potentially a clash of, as you say, sort of mindsets or approaches there. And it's something actually that we're seeing, I think, more broadly in terms of looking towards the sort of next generation, and you know, whether it's going to be sort of software based and iterative and so on, or if it's going to be rolled out over the next 10 years in the same way that sort of previous cycles have. But I mean, when you're sort of there, sort of working with your clients on these, then I just can't help but wonder, you know, whether the outcomes of the transformation programs that you do with them, you know, to what extent that depends upon what kind of mindset is prevailing with your clients.
Yeah, I think that might be a vehicle to change that mindset is sometimes utilize a hyperscaler. Yeah, you maybe not for your big consumer 50 million subscriber or whatever, but start a service, be it a different brand, be it for IoT, be it for a specific slice. Start a service out of a hyperscaler, out of a cloud deployment, and that can be the AWS 5G offering or whatever, just to learn. Yeah, I don't see that happening for the consumer market, to be honest, and never, because of the ownership of data model that we also discussed earlier, and also because telco would give away too much from their crown jewels. But using this as a learning exercise, because end of day, the hyperscalers are also using normal technologies. They don't have anything fancy. They just have it set up in the right way together, right? They use the same tooling and scripting, thinking and mindset that we believe is the right one, and copying that, or at least learning that, and then do it step by step, slice by slice. 5G is the ideal architecture for that. Doing it in that fashion. You can even have a subscriber data management for a slice separated from your bigger consumer markets, be it enterprise market, and that is very helpful, a very important learning exercise. And honestly, and also because you are looking into that, it may only materialize in 6G in 8 to 10 years from now. I give you that. But maybe at least for the consumer market, but the smaller one might be something you can experiment in the next 3 years.
That's a really exciting prospect. And in fact, that kind of ties in with something I was going to ask, which is to do with the timelines for these kinds of transformations. I mean, I dare say it's going to vary a good deal, but I mean, what sense of urgency are you getting from your clients as far as, you know, how far they want to go and how quickly?
I think we all know the 5G standalone is currently being introduced, and that seems to be the next big medium-sized trigger to change stuff. So very likely, and if stuff like interworking is solved, then this is the next big trigger. And I see that actually starting 2023-24, where the operators are starting a 5G deployment in something that could be, at least from an architectural point of view, could also run in a public cloud. It will not, because of what we said earlier, but the principle is the same. And if that nicely integrates in terms of interworking with a 4G and older architectures, then this is something we expect to see probably as soon as next year.
Wow. Well,
Not for the consumer market. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about the porting the 50 million SIM cards that might be even 3G SIM cards to a 5G standalone in 2023. So it will be selective. It will be something that is more segregated than before. And I think that is something telcos should learn and should think of. There's no longer, if I demand my vendors to be no longer big monolith, I need to change myself. I also need to accept that a certain subscriber set has different KPIs, has different qualities, and that can lead into a different system here. They need to accept that it's no longer all in one big system, including their own designs. Yeah, and that is a change for them too.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like that could be really exciting though as well, in terms of being able to create some differentiated offerings and that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and actually, as an anecdote, there are many more in North America. I need to say, I feel a bit sorry for Europe on this, where the bigger operators, I think by intention or intentionally, have smaller brands that have a low cost feeling, like an EasyJet operator, and they're using different vendors for that and experimenting with it. And there are many examples in North America, and I think it's exactly why they're doing it, is to find out how far can I go. So where's the end of my cost saving, where I'm becoming unreliable and getting bad press about it, and how much can I save? How much can I disaggregate my system before it becomes unstable? That's, I think, where they are.
That's a really exciting point. And I guess a few years ago, actually, somebody was talking to me about some of the changes that were afoot, and particularly as we're seeing with things like new models of MVNO, more private networks, and this kind of thing. They were kind of talking about the idea that we might be on the cusp of a Cambrian explosion of different kinds of networks and so on, far from the sort of old, sort of traditional centralized monolith. And the way that you're talking here, it sounds like that might actually happen, within the individual telco as well. I think that's ever such an exciting thought.
I'm not sure if it turns out to be true, but I think the fact that the non-mobile phone oriented reality is lurking around the edge, if that's proper English. So we can see there will be a future where not everybody has a mobile phone. So it's no longer the phone is the main device. And that, of course, also supports or pushes the reason for a separate slice, for a separate network that is used for different purpose. And that can be much more on low energy and forget about the bandwidth. I don't need 4 gigabit 8K video anymore. I need to my device to survive a month or so. So, and 5G gives us this. 6G will probably even be better, but 5G already gives today an option to tweak on a per slice basis the triangle between battery, speed, latency, and stuff like that. So I can already balance my network in different aspects at this point in time. And here, a multi-vendor scenario is the ideal combination, or is the ideal base for that.
Yeah, and I guess underlying all of this, I think you and I have talked in the past about the idea of orchestration, and since then, there's been a lot of discussion about, for example, beginning to involve different architectures, potentially in future, involving, let's say, satellites, as well as sort of fixed or Wi-Fi systems, maybe even sort of using side-loading functions so that devices can mesh amongst themselves. And I don't know, I can't help but wonder sort of what implications that would then have, for you or for your operator clients.
Yeah, I think the main change will be that if the mobile phone is no longer the majority of the connections, or is creating the connections, this will be a big change. Yeah, because first, scalability becomes a new topic again. We're then talking about not 50 million, but maybe 50 billion. But very low bandwidth devices, and that will happen. Yeah, so in here automation is even more important, and good news on this end is, in my view, because we are all vendors in the industry are in the teething problems of CI/CD and automation. I think this is a clear sign that it's happening. So yes, there are problems here and there, but these are operational day-to-day problems, which is a proof that it is happening in reality. And as soon as this is over, and expected to be over in maybe 1 or 2 years from now, then creating a slice for a different type of device or different use case, totally automated, even radio, even O-RAN gives me the capability to sort of tweak the coverage in certain areas according to my KPIs. As soon as that becomes real, then we will see funny new use cases. However, I need to say that I see a problem from our observation. We are not active in O-RAN, but the Open RAN approach in terms of automation and everything, orchestration and automation, must be the same as core. If it continues to be different, then we are facing a two-world problem here, that we cannot integrate them easily. There will be, again, mediation layers and crap, which I think is the wrong architecture, and this will be a major problem if the Open RAN folks, or the RAN folks in general, and the core folks do not improve their joint architectural thinking.
Brilliant. That's actually a really useful lesson to take away with it in terms of industry structure. Oliver, we could talk about this a lot longer, but I want to respect your time and our audiences as well. So for now, I'd like to say, thank you very much for this, and hopefully we can return to this at other times in the future.
Yep, very good, Alex. Thanks. Very interesting discussion. I'm looking forward for the next one.